Hi everybody, thanks for tuning in tonight for the live session. I wanted to start tonight by talking a little bit about the type of training I do and why it's different than what other trainers do. So I own a dog daycare. So for the past 14 years I've owned a dog daycare in the Philadelphia area. And make sure my phone's on silent this week. So at the daycare, because I'm a trainer and I own it, we run things much differently than other daycares. So we could have anywhere from 50 to 70 plus dogs on any given day of the week, and we have all different breeds. We don't restrict any breeds, all different sizes, all different ages, and they are all in one big pack. We put everybody together. And the reason for that, there's several reasons, but one of the reasons is that we feel that typically in the real world, if you have a tiny dog, they're going to run into bigger dogs and vice versa and need to know how to handle that. A big dog needs to learn how to play nicely with a smaller dog. A smaller dog needs to learn that they can't boss around every dog that they meet. And those are pretty typical things. So we have everybody together, but we can do that safely because of the behavioral work that we do. So when we train our staff and we work with the dogs, we're training them to read the body language of dogs and anticipate issues before they happen, as opposed to just reacting to them after they've happened. And that makes a huge difference in the quality of the care that your dog's getting when they're at daycare, and it also makes a big difference in the allowing your dog to be well-rounded. And when the staff is trained that way, it prevents issues. So you have less incidences, less fights, less arguments, and everybody is learning while they're there. They're learning how to play at a healthy energy level. They're learning how to play with dogs that might play different than them. They're learning how to listen when a dog doesn't want to play with them. That's a big thing that a lot of adolescent dogs need to learn. So being surrounded by that for the last 14 plus years has taught me a lot about dog language and how they communicate with each other. Generally joke regularly that I'm a crazy dog lady because I can pretty quickly read the situation, what's going on. When I go to people's homes and I'm doing training, I can usually figure out pretty quickly what the scenario is, and I can listen to the dog in a way that's different than most humans listen to their dogs, and I can help be a translator, basically. I feel that that's what it comes down to a lot. The dog is trying desperately to tell the owner something. The owner is oblivious to it because the dog's not speaking in English, and there's just a lot of miscommunication going on. So I can go in and help them understand what's going on and help to communicate on behalf of the dog with hopefully a little bit more knowledge and accuracy based on what I'm coming from. In addition to the pack of dogs I have at home, we have the big pack of dogs at work. So when I do training, that's where my training's coming from, and we consider that the behavioral side of the house. So training has two different worlds. There's obedience and behavioral. Obedience is teaching your dog to sit, teaching your dog to down, teaching your dog to stay. Behavioral is how do you talk to your dog more in their language? How do you understand why they're doing something, especially if it's something that's not productive or destructive or dangerous? That's the behavioral side of it. But when you can combine those two things, if let's say you have a great dog and all you want is for them to be better behaved and be less embarrassing in public, that's fine. But if you can communicate to them more clearly in their language and they understand you better, you get there much faster than if all you're doing is using treats and trying to get them to follow the treat to do a command, and then you don't do any of the rest of the communication. It just leaves a whole host of miscommunication. I always use the analogy of people who, like if you went to a foreign country and you didn't speak the language, okay, you're going to be very limited in the amount of communication you can have with the people around you. If you move into a home with a family that doesn't speak English and you don't speak their language, you'll figure out some basics, but the bottom line is you're going to have a very limited relationship with those individuals until you figure out how to communicate better. Now, if somebody then moves into the home that does speak English, you will have a much different relationship with that individual than you do with the other people in the house that don't speak your language. That's what it's like for dogs. Dogs move into our homes. We don't speak dog. They don't speak English. And then you bring another dog into the house and they bond at a totally different level, or they have issues at a totally different level. And we are kind of left out of the scene because we're just over there doing our thing, and they don't have any hope of communicating with us to ask for help or just to allow us to participate with whatever's going on. So when you can do the behavioral side of it and talk to them more in their language and understand what they're doing, that's the best possible relationship that you can have with your dog. And that's what I'm always trying to teach my owners, okay? And one of the challenges is that, people want to fix an issue. So let's say, your dog's having an issue and you want that issue fixed. Well, that one issue may be part of a bigger miscommunication or a bigger problem. And there may not be a fix for that one issue unless you look at the big picture. It would be like you going to your family practitioner and saying, hey, I have a pain in my arm. What can you do about it? And if your doctor just treats you for the pain in your arm and doesn't look into any other reason as to why there might be a pain in your arm, there could be some major consequences for that medically, because you could have something serious going on. But if you don't communicate, if there's no communication and they don't look into it, then you're left out in the dark. And that's similar to the dog training, where fixing that one issue isn't the magic key to having a great dog. Then you need to understand the big picture. And I'm always talking about the videos that I did about personalities and about the dog, how they view their family unit. If you haven't watched those videos yet, I highly encourage you to go back on my Facebook page and look at them. They're also on my YouTube page. But that will allow you to start that foundational work of paying more attention to your dog's own language and how can you communicate better with them. Because there's so much to the animals that we don't understand because we don't pay attention. One of the examples I like to use for that is we went hiking, this is years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago now. We went hiking on the Appalachian Trail. We took our pack with us, and our youngest Corso, Liam, was 8 weeks old, and we went hiking, and it was a difficult trail. So all my dogs, when we hike, are off leash, as long as I can facilitate it. And so everybody's off leash except for the puppy, and he's only 8 weeks old. So there's no way he can climb up a mountain and back down. So it was a fairly difficult trail, a lot of rocks and things like that. So I would take turns having him. I got a puppy papoose, so I had a backpack that he fit in that was on my front, and I would put him in it when he was tired. Not that he ever wanted to admit that he was tired. He would be like, no, I don't want to go in it. And then you put him in it and he'd be like, okay, I guess I'll just rest for a minute. And then I want to get out now. So it was back and forth a lot. But I noticed when we hike, my oldest dog at the time, Basta, who I lost in November, he was always in charge. He would go and scout the trail up ahead. So he would go out ahead of us and scout the trail within vision distance of me, and would then turn around and watch us and wait for us to get closer and then go scout further on the trail. And then my other dog, Argos, would always be in the back. He would always be in the back of the group. So he was always bringing up the rear, and I never thought anything of it. And then I noticed on this particular hike that every time that the puppy was in the papoose that I was holding, all of a sudden Basta was coming back and standing next to me, and Argos would go out in the very front. Now, I noticed it because Argos never went out in the front. He never did that. Basta was always out in the front, and Argos was always in the back. But now here's Argos out in the front, and Basta was next to me. And then whenever I put the puppy on the ground, they would switch. Basta would go back out in front and Argos would come back next to me. The entire hike, this is what happened. I realized it and started paying attention and was watching it happen. And my best guess, again, because they don't speak English, is that because it was a difficult hike, when I was holding the puppy and carrying him, I was more vulnerable. So Basta would come back and be next to me in case I needed him. And then he sent Argos out front to keep an eye on things. And then when the puppy was on the ground, he would switch and say, okay, you go back there and babysit that kid that I don't want anything to do with, and I'll go back out and do my job. All of that happened throughout the entire day silently. There was no, like, he wasn't whistling, hey, Argos, come on back. You got to, babysit the kid now, and I'm going to go back out front. It's all silent, but yet it was happening, and I was watching it, and it continued throughout the day on the hike. So how are they doing that? They have a level of communication that we don't understand fully. Scientists don't understand it fully, but the reality is that it's there. Just like most animals, their communication is nonverbal. So if we start to pay more attention, then we start to get clued into it. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to somebody's house and they have a new dog that's out of control, and the old dog is looking at me like, please do something about this punk that they've brought into my life that I hate, because now I'm being tortured and bullied, and I'm not comfortable doing something about it, but they certainly aren't going to do something about it. So then I have to communicate to the owners, this is what's actually going on. Your older dog is being bullied right now, and you're allowing it. So what kind of a message are you saying to him or her at that point? So you have to start to pay attention, and the little videos and blogs and things like that I put out are pieces to the puzzle. So if you look at your relationship with your dog as a big puzzle that needs to be completed, all of these little tips and tidbits are pieces that allow you to put the puzzle together. And hopefully by the end of it, you have a perfect puzzle that's completed, which then means you have the best possible relationship with your dog. So hopefully that helps a little bit explain why I talk about this stuff a lot and all of that. But I felt like it was important to go over that with you. So let's look at our question for tonight. Okay, so I got a question from a gentleman named Dave, and I'm not sure where he lives. It came through on Facebook. So, and he has a 6-month-old puppy who is scared of cars, and when they go walking, and the dog, when I'm not sure if it's a boy or girl, when the dog sees the car, he will pull himself into a bush, lay under the bush, lay down, cower, flinch, and freeze under the bush until the car's gone. So he wants to know how he can overcome this so that they can walk along the road. Okay, so this kind of fits into what I was just talking about. If you have a dog that's afraid of something, first of all, dogs can't rationalize certain things, especially when they're puppies. So if a dog was at a breeder's location or comes from a rescue and was born on a farm somewhere, and then they collected the puppies and gave them to the rescue to place, they may not have ever come across a car. So they don't have any context for that. And that goes for pretty much anything that a puppy can come across as when they're babies and they're growing. So at 5.5 months or 6 months old, I'm sure your dog has seen cars, but it doesn't have any context to understand that when it drives by, it's not, going to run them over and gunning for them. So it's very common that puppies will be afraid of something that they're not sure of or that's unknown. And there is no one thing that you can do while you're walking with your dog that'll make that all better. The reality is that in your relationship, your dog has to be able to trust that you're going to keep them safe. And if they don't feel like that, and if they don't feel that your job is to keep them safe, then they're going to panic. They become Chicken Little. Oh my God, the sky is falling. We're all going to die. And that's when the dog is basically telling you, I don't trust that you're going to keep me safe. And that's generally because we as humans tend to be oblivious to dogs that are fearful, especially when they're puppies. We don't even notice it. So if you have a young puppy and they're not like super wiggly and running up to new people or running up to new things, but yet they just sit and watch and observe. Okay, that's sitting and watching and observing. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're just chill. It could mean that they're actually super scared, but they're frozen, and they've shut down and gone to their happy place inside their head, like, oh, I hope this is over quickly because I'm not comfortable. And it's a very subtle thing to notice. It's hard for the layman, the non-professional trainer, to recognize that in a puppy. But if you start to pay attention to clues, then you can see, does your dog actively seek out new things? Or do they stay away from them or bark at them because they're not sure what it is? So if your dog is very confident and outgoing and sees a new object in their environment and they run right up to it and they start poking it or exploring it, like, hey, who are you doing here? Then they're probably on the side of the personality spectrum, like the natural born leader or the middle management, or even a socialite would do that if it's something that's interesting to them. If it's something that's not interesting to them, if they don't think it's going to be a good time, then they're not going to bother. But a middle manager or a natural born leader on the personality scale would definitely go and explore and be like, who are you and what are you doing here and what does this mean for me? But if your dog's on the other end of the spectrum where they're shy or introverted, or even some worker bee dogs, then something new in the environment that could be a threat. It could mean them harm. And they're not sure, so they're going to avoid it when they're young, or run away, fight or flight. So this puppy in this example is fleeing, trying to get away from the scary car. Or as they get older, they figure out that they will try and proactively keep whatever it is that they're afraid of away from them. And that's when you see dogs barking and carrying on and lunging on the end of the leash, or when you walk by their house and they're behind a fence or on the invisible fence and that's what they're doing. That behavior isn't necessarily outward aggression. It could be fear on the inside, and that's causing them to react that way because they've learned that will keep whatever they're not sure of away from them. So you really want to understand what your dog's personality is as a first step. And the next thing you need to understand is that dogs handle fear differently than we do. So, well, actually, I shouldn't say that. It's fairly similar. So let me give you an example that will help you to understand this part of it. So let's say you are scared of spiders, okay, and you're deathly afraid of spiders. You do not like spiders. And I come into the room with you, and I bring a big hairy tarantula in, and I have it in my hand, and it's loose. Okay, and I say to you, you know what? You don't need to be scared of this spider. It's not going to hurt you. Okay? Whatever I say, it's, you're hearing, well, womp, 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 womp. You're having a panic attack because you're looking at this big hairy spider that you're scared of, and you don't care what I say. You want the thing gone. Okay? Now, if I handle it differently and I say, okay, whatever happens, I'm going to make sure that this spider doesn't come near you. Okay? I'm not going to let the spider get near you. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't get near you. And then I proceed to demonstrate to you over and over again that the scary spider is not going to come near you. So now you're thinking, okay, I can at least breathe now. I'm not having a panic attack. Doesn't mean I like the spider anymore, but I can at least be in the same room with the spider and not be petrified because I've proven to you that I'm going to keep the spider away from you. Then next step is, if all of a sudden the spider, whenever it happens to walk by you or come in your vicinity, starts chucking like little Hershey Kisses at you, or M&Ms, and you happen to really like M&Ms or Hershey Kisses, then over time, you start to look differently at that spider. Like, maybe that spider's not so bad. I can tolerate it, I can be around it, and this is okay. I'm not petrified, I'm not panicking, I'm not fleeing, I'm not in that panic state anymore. And as a matter of fact, the spider's not so bad. And the next time I meet another spider, maybe that spider's got Hershey Kisses too, so maybe that spider's not so bad. And that's kind of the mental process that we try and take dogs through that are afraid. They need to understand that you're going to protect them from whatever they're scared of. So when you find out what they're scared of, so in this example, it's a car, so then you have to communicate to your dog in the only ways that we can as a human, which is body language, that you're going to keep them safe from that car. So I mentioned Basta, my pack leader that I just lost in November. He was a special dog. He was a natural born leader. He was very confident and very kind to other dogs. And he just had a demeanor about him that was very calm and confident. And dogs were drawn to him because of that. But whenever we had a dog that was afraid that we were trying to rehabilitate, we would usually use Basta. And we would use him by just having him walk with us, like have one trainer with the training dog and one trainer with Basta, and go for a walk. And go for a walk in a very quiet area that's not really busy, not a lot of traffic, not a lot of people, and just let the training dog process what's going on. But what Basta would do in order to make that dog feel better was just to be there. He would just be there. He would kind of ignore the other dog. And when dogs are communicating with each other, the less eye contact they make and the less, like, he would look at them and then look away. That's called diffusing body language. So basically telling the dog, I don't mean you any harm, don't worry about me. But his confidence was very clear. So what would happen is the other dogs would then, because they speak the same language, be like, oh my God, you're going to keep me safe. And would just fall in love with him and want him there all the time because they understood him and he was telling them in dog language, I will protect you, I've got this, so there's nothing you need to be scared of. So the other piece of it is too, that when a dog is scared and they freak out, the way the other dog will react to that will communicate to them as well. So I've said this example before, one of my videos, but the first time we had a big thunderstorm when my Frenchie Seamus was a puppy. We had the windows open and it was a really loud boom of thunder that sounded like the house was falling down. And Seamus jumped up from a dead sleep in the bed, and of course all the dogs were in the bed with us. He jumped up from a dead sleep and was looking around like, and barking. He didn't know what the noise was, he didn't know where it was coming from, but he was barking because he was scared. And Basta picked up his head and looked at him like, what in the world are you doing? There's nothing wrong. Knock it off. And Seamus kind of looked around and all the dogs were having the same reaction to him, and he was like, okay, well, I guess everybody else is okay, so I guess the noise is okay. And he laid down and went back to sleep and slept then through the rest of the thunderstorm. So when dogs are communicating to other dogs, there's nothing here for you to be afraid of. They look at them and act like, dude, what is your problem? There is nothing here to be afraid of. So we need to try and emulate that when we have a dog that's fearful. Now you have to keep in mind that they have a threshold where they can see something that they're scared of. And like I gave the example of the spider. Okay, so if I came in the room with a spider and I was, 20 feet away from you on the other side of the room and came in with the spider and didn't come any closer to you, that would be, okay, I'm still not happy, I'm panicking a little bit, but just stay over there. Versus if I came into the room and came right up to you and said, here, I'm just going to touch you with the spider, and then you'll feel better. It won't hurt you, I promise. Okay, you're going to tell me what to do with that spider and hit the road. So you have to be aware of your dog's threshold for that panic state. So if they're afraid of cars, walking along the road where the car's rushing right past you is not the place to start. You need to teach your dog that you're going to protect them and keep them safe. A good way to do that when you're on leash is to put the dog on the opposite side of you and physically move them there whenever there's a car coming. But you want to do that in a place where you can see the cars from a distance, and the dog isn't that close to them to reach that panic, fight, or flight state, which is the fleeing is what you're seeing when they bolt under the bushes. We have a park near us that we will use for this purpose, that you can see the traffic. It's probably like, I don't know, a football field away from the path that you're walking in one point, and that's the closest the road gets. But you can see the traffic, but the dog isn't right on the road or right next to it. So maybe something like that, if you could find an area, or even parking lot. Like if there's a big parking lot and everybody parks up towards the front of the store, and you walk your dog in the very back of the parking lot where the cars aren't, something like that might also work. You have to work with them before they reach that threshold of panic, and then you ease them into getting closer and closer. The more they trust you that you're going to keep them safe, the closer you can get to the cars. So I think that's the process that you want to go through when your dog is afraid of something. And like I said, there's no one thing that you can do that's going to fix it. You have to look at the big picture and understand that your dog is telling you that they're scared, and it's your job to make them not scared. And the best way to do that is to understand underlying why they're scared, which is probably part of their personality. And also, they haven't been exposed to certain things, so you've got to help them build positive associations to new things. And you have to work with them on, that threshold of avoiding that, not getting so close to it that they freak out and try and flee the situation. You got to work from a distance in the beginning so that they can learn to trust that you're going to keep them safe. And like I said, if you try that, moving the dog to the other side so that you're always in between the scary object and them, that tells them in dog language. That's one of the silent things that you can do in dog language, to tell them, don't be afraid, I got this. This is my job to handle this. So hopefully that helps. That was a very good question, Dave. Thank you for sending that in. And I hope the information tonight, you found it valuable. And I just put out a blog post today, if you haven't seen it yet, since we're in that season, flea and tick season, on holistic ways to combat flea and tick. So the chemicals that we use to either our dogs ingest it or we put it on their skin, it's insecticides, and it's very dangerous. There's any amount of research you do on it is very scary. So one of my dogs had a bad reaction to it. He actually had a stroke from it. And since then, I've gone on a mission of trying to find better ways to protect my dogs from fleas and ticks. So that's what's in the blog, is some DIY home remedies for different things that you can do to help shield your dog from the insects of the summertime around here. So hopefully, if you haven't seen that yet, make sure you go and check that out. And I hope everyone has a great night, and I'll see you next week. Thank you.